In the year 2000, the chess world faced one of the most epic but also one of the most shocking moments of all times. Garry Kasparov lost his world championship title against Vladimir Kramnik after 15 years of pure domination. I think it was one of the most epic world championship matches ever. And although Kasparov lost this title, I still think that he was, in my opinion, still the best player in the world, because afterwards he won also some other top events. He also was the highest rated player in the world. So still there was an era after the World Championship match 2000, which Kasparov played really great games. He played really tactical brilliances, and in 2001, I think he got his small revenge against Kramnik, in which he, in one particular game, sacrificed his queen in such a beautiful, sharp, tactical way, and that's the game that we show today. Let's check out this beauty: Kramnik versus Kasparov in Kasparov's small revenge game in 2001. So here, Kramnik opened with the move d4. Kasparov's response was the move d5. We have c4, the queen's gambit, and Kasparov is saying, "Show me what you got. I'll play now the queen's gambit," accepted with d takes c4. Really, really wild stuff. Here, Garry is saying, "Okay, we got your positional battles in the World Championship match. We played many Berlin Waltz. Let's see now how you're going to handle this open battle immediately." So after move d takes c4, Kramnik goes into this line, knight to f3, which is really one of the best methods to meet the queen's gambit accepted lines, because if you play e3, in some occasions you risk this particular line with the move e5. I like more this method with the move knight to f3, which prevents, of course, the e5 immediately. So in the continuation e6, played by Garry Kasparov, we have now the move e3 and now the move a6. So from Black's perspective, we're waiting this bishop to pick up the pawn on c4, and then we can hit it with b5, c5. Maybe in some occasions we can even break through with the move c4. In the continuation, bishop to c4 by Kramnik, and now c5, hitting the center immediately here on d4. Kingside casting, knight to f6, normal development, and here after move bishop to b3, Kramnik is trying to build sort of an attacking formation. He's trying to reroute his bishop on c2, and also the bishop is not endangered anymore by this b5 possibility. He's trying now to get the bishop on c2, maybe even the queen on d3, and maybe e4, e5, deflect the knight somehow on f6 from the defense of the king, maybe also get somehow the dark square bishop into the game. So it's a method, but of course Kasparov has different opportunities here, because he's trying now to play the move knight to c6, and he's trying to get here an isolated d pawn, which is also one of the common strategies of blacks, to leave white with the structural weakness with the isolated d pawn, which is also many times the position that you face from white's perspective. So in the continuation, knight to c3, now Kasparov goes into this line, c takes d4, and after e takes d4, okay, we can say now white has an isolated pawn. It can be sometimes a weakness, because the isolated pawn is something that you don't want to get. But I think in these positions of the queen's gambit accepted lines, it's not such a huge problem, because look at this. The bishop on b3 is hitting the pawn, the square d5. The knight on c3 is hitting the square d5. The queen is also hitting the d5 square. So I think the d5 is an easy goal that the white will make for sure. So d5 we can play whenever we like. So that's why I think it's not such a huge problem that you're left here with an isolated pawn from white's perspective. But now you see the bishop is coming into the game, because after e takes d4, this long diagonal got liberated. So in the continuation, bishop to e7, rook to e1. Kramnik is of course getting the rook where already the king is. If something clears on the e file, then the king could be endangered. So that's why Garry Kasparov has now to secure the king by casting. Bishop to f4, and this move is very popular also now these days. It has of course the main advantage that you're controlling further the e5 square, and what you're trying to do is maybe to get your knight somehow on e5, queen to f3, queen to h3, getting somehow with this bishop a beautiful activity. Kasparov, okay, says you have a beautiful activity, but now at least I'll chase one of your bishop, because now the bishop on b3 is endangered. And okay, maybe you can retreat now with the move bishop to c2, but I think then black would play a very annoying move b5. b5 is unpleasant to handle, because the knight would be then supported on c4. We'll play eventually bishop to b7, rook to c8, and we'll have a further control of the c4 square. If you prevent it with b3, then of course after bishop to b7 and rook to c8, your knight could be loosed a little bit on c3. Also then the bishop is lined up on the c file, so it is playable, but you have of course also some different different worries here. So in the continuation, after move knight to a5, here Kramnik got his goal, d5. He's advancing the isolated pawn. He doesn't want to have the structural weakness for the whole game. In the continuation, we have now knight takes b3. After queen to b3, Kasparov picks up now the pawn on d5, and here comes the actual tactical idea of Kramnik. He wants to line up here the rook against the queen, and the queen is now really endangered. And what Kramnik probably hoped for is that Garry Kasparov maybe goes into this line with queen to e8. Probably he calculated or has somewhere prepared this line at home. After queen to e8, the game, I think, splashes a little bit because it's a dynamic game, but you see now after a couple of moves nothing dramatically is happening. After knight to d5, e takes d5, queen to d5, and now bishop to e6 is of course black's continuation. Okay, white will eventually pick up the pawn on b7, and okay, you cannot pick up the pawn on b2. That's the issue because you lose the bishop on e7. But I think in these types of positions, when you have the bishop pair, when you have a beautiful activity, when you have such an open game, and when you probably will include now the queen into the game somehow, when you probably kick away first the queen from b7, I think it is playable. So probably Kramnik didn't want to wanted maybe to get this line where he's at least up a pawn, but Garry Kasparov after move rook to d1 had a different idea in mind. You can guess what Garry Kasparov is doing. He's playing now a beautiful move, knight takes f4, sacrifices the queen for the rook and the piece, and he has also of course gained the pawn. So when we count material, it should be 9 points. Also for the queen, that's worth 9 points. So I think it's a decent compensation, but you have to now struggle. You have to be now a tactical beast in order to win this game from black's perspective. And of course, Garry is one, so that's why he decided to go into this really wild line. So after move knight to f4, Kramnik has of course to accept now the challenge. Rook to d8, rook takes d8, rook to d1, competing now on the d file, and Garry Kasparov gets back. He has to play now this method because he has issues. His main issue, I think, is this light square bishop. He has to get it somehow into the game. He has to reroute it somehow. The problem is now if the d file is open, then you have some trouble to do that. So that's why here Garry Kasparov went to this line, knight to d5. Here Kramnik didn't play this move. He didn't want to simplify the game again, because after knight to d5, e takes d5, rook to d5, bishop to e6, and rook to d8, rook takes d8. The problem is now you cannot pick up the pawn on b7 because you can checkmate it on d1. So now probably white would continue with this move, queen to c2. And still I think, okay, this is playable for both sides. Black will rely on this beautiful bishop pair, has now the rook and the bishop for the queen. The pawn count is the same, so this would be probably a drawish line. So that's why after move knight to d5 that Kasparov played, Kramnik went into a more aggressive line with knight to e5. He's trying to keep his chances, he's trying to keep his pieces on the board, he's trying to complicate things further, because still, as we said, black has some problems where to go with the light square bishop. So in the continuation, bishop to f6 by Kasparov, knight to c4, hitting also the pawn, the square, this weak square on b6. In the continuation, rook to b8 was played by Garry Kasparov. If you play b5 here immediately, this wouldn't be good, because you get this one, knight takes d5 first. After e takes d5, knight to b6 is here creating really some tactical madness. You have to step back with the rook. The d5 now is suddenly weak, so it's not something that you want to get out of this position from black's perspective. So that's why after move knight to c4, Kasparov kept it calm, played now rook to b8, is trying really desperately to get somehow this bishop into the game. Bishop to d7 and bishop to c6, it's a basic plan here. In the continuation, knight to a5, we have now bishop to d7 and knight to e4. Here you cannot play knight to b7 in this particular position, because you get this one, bishop to c8 hits of course the knight. You could maybe try also to sacrifice the queen in order to gain some material, but actually it's not working, because after rook takes b3, a takes b3, will simply pick up now the knight on d8, and now after knight to d5, e takes d5. Okay, you can pick up also this pawn, but now with bishop to e7 we get out of the range. We will eventually play ideas like bishop to d7, bishop to b5, keeping the position compact and will probably hit the weak pawn on b2. Also then the b3 is weak, so this is in my opinion a much better continuation here for black. So that's why after move bishop to d7, here Kramnik again tried to spice up the game. He's trying to dance with his knights, he's trying to search for opportunities, especially the c5 is now of course a weak square in black's position. Here in the continuation, bishop to e7 was played by Kasparov. He's keeping his chances here on dark squares. In the continuation, knight to c4, again with some ideas to attack further the dark squares, but now finally bishop to b5 here. Garry is saying, I cannot tolerate both of these annoying knights. I will get rid of at least one of these stupid horses. So he's trying really to get rid of one of the, and then play the move b5, maybe keeping again the pawn structure compact, because as we said, the light square bishop caused him now many positional problems. So in the continuation, knight to e5 was played by Kramnik. He's saying, no, you're not going to get rid of this annoying knight. In the continuation, bishop to e8, and this was, I think, one of the moments where I think black is maybe even taking over. So now Garry Kasparov kept the bishop in the game. Okay, it's maybe not optimal to aim with this bishop on this side of the board, but I think he regrouped now. The most important thing is that he has now the f7 protected with his pawn, with his bishop, and now the knight can maybe play a little bit around. Also, we can play finally the move b5, rook to c8, occupying the c file, and slowly but surely, I think this is a position that I would love to now play more from black's perspective. So in the continuation, we have now h3 by Kramnik, creating some breathing spaces for the king. b5 finally, beautiful move here by Kasparov, queen to g3, and now after rook to c8, mission accomplished. I think now all of the pieces of blacks are in good shape here. The knight is centralized, the bishop good here. On both sides, they're doing at least something. Rooks on the most active files. So as I said, really a beautiful setup here. And here, king to h1 was played by Vladimir Kramnik, and that was probably his first mistake in the game. It's not so even easy to say why this is a mistake, but I think in these types of positions, you have to be active. You have to create at least simple threats. You have to create some kind of a threat. You have to make your opponent react. That's now, I think, the most important thing. So that's why the main move that Kramnik should have played here is maybe the move knight to g4. Maybe he was scared about this f5 idea, but then it doesn't matter. We'll just hit the knight here on d5. After e takes d5, now knight to h6 can be played. You have to step back with the king, and now knight to f5. This would be, I think, a beautiful line. It's again equal for both sides. I'm not saying this is winning for white, but this was the only way to complicate things, to keep somehow the tension in the game. But after move king to h1, he allowed basically here a beautiful move here for Garry Kasparov, which finally Garry Kasparov missed to play. And the beautiful move would have been, maybe you can pause the video and try to see now the best continuation for black. This wasn't played in the game, but maybe you can play better than Garry Kasparov. Of course, it's hard, but let's see now what he actually missed. Let's see now, really beautiful continuation. Again, I'm not saying this is completely winning, but it would be really hard to play against this move. So maybe just for fun, try to see here the best continuation for black. So okay, the best move actually is here, the move knight to e3. The problem is you cannot pick up the rook here on d8 because you get checked here with rook to c1. Now you have to step back. There's nothing that can be done, and we have now a beautiful windmill tactic with our knight. You have to step back. Now we pick up again the queen. It comes again with check, and again you have to step back, and now after move knight to f1, we can finally also pick up the rook, and basically the game is over. So of course, after move knight to e3, white doesn't have to play rook takes d8, but white has to now step back to b1, and it's now a strange square for the rook. The rook is paralyzed, the rook is out of game, and now we just play a calm knight to f5. Look at this, after queen to f3, f6, kick with the knight, and now we would use, I think, the new square for a beautiful knight. We will play knight to d4, hitting the queen again, and then e5, and in my opinion, this is perfect position. You can play also rook to c4, you can play whatever you like, but I think you're getting closer with your pieces. You're getting your pieces in better shape. So that's why it was a huge moment for Kasparov. He could have played really a beautiful knight to e3. He played a5. It's not a problem. It's not that he's losing the game because he played the move a5. But as I said, knight to e3 was probably the winning move. So here h5 was h4 by Kramnik. We have now a4. Knight to g5. Again, Kramnik is not playing the best knight move. Again, he has to play, I think, with this move, knight to g4, in order to create some madness with potential knight to h6 moves. That was the only plan that he can make. We have seen after move f5, we can play rook to d5, knight to h6, and similar stuff. So, but knight to g5 is causing now many problems, because here Kasparov plays h6, kicks away the knight, plays now knight to f6, is rerouting the knight, and he can now, of course, trade off the rooks, because his rooks are now active. The queen is a little bit out of game. The bishops are good, and as I said, here already black has a better position. Rook to d8, rook takes d8, queen to f4. If you play, for instance, knight to g4 now, if you try to maybe simplify the game, then actually black can take knight to g4, queen to g4, and again with these ideas, rook to d1, this would be very complicated to play for white, because you have to cover yourself, and now you just occupy the second rank. If you get attacked somehow, you just play king to f8, and look at this, both of these bishops would protect the king. The king would protect also the bishop, so no checks by the queen are possible. Now you just pick up the pawns on the 7th rank with the support of the bishops. Look at this, the bishops are aiming here, and of course they would support the beautiful rook's activity. So that's why nothing can basically be done. After knight to g4, we can simply trade off the knights and occupy, and afterwards the first rank, and then afterwards the second rank. So here the continuation after rook to d8, as we said, queen to f4 was played by Kramnik, but now rook to d1 anyway, and now king to h2. If you cover yourself with knight to g1, again, it's not so good, because you get a simple move here, bishop to c5, simply targeting now many weaknesses in white's position. Queen to f3, now look at this, rook to d2, again, we occupy the second rank. We can always play king to f8, keeping everything glued together, everything compact. Also, the knight is, of course, protecting the bishop on e8. Now, as I said, you have several tactical problems on the second rank. So, after move rook to d1, king to h2 was played by Kramnik, but now bishop to d6. The bishop comes now in a brutal way into the game. Many pieces are lined up on the dark square diagonal. There's nothing that can be done here. Kramnik tried g3, but it opens now the position for another bishop. Bishop to c6 was now Kasparov's continuation, of course. Look at this, you cannot move this knight from f3. If you move it, you get checkmated at once. So really, this is now open fire with both of these beautiful bishops. From this point on, the game is basically over. So g4 was played by Vladimir Kramnik, rook to d3, king to g1, and here Kasparov picks up the knight on f3. In this position, Vladimir Kramnik resigned. So incredible game, really wild stuff, immortal tactic, this queen sacrifice with this idea to pick up the bishop on f4, giving up the queen for the rook and bishop and one pawn. Incredible performance here by Garry Kasparov. It was one of his best games for sure, but I think in this game he got at least his small revenge against Vladimir Kramnik, who took him, of course, the prestigious World Championship title in 2000. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. Interesting ideas of the Queen's Gambit accepted for sure. If you want to see more brutal tactical games like this, check out our Comment Chess Games, the best chess games of all time series. Here's the link of our playlist. And if you want to see maybe the top engines battling it out in even more brutal games than this, check out my Comment Chess Games played by computers. Here's also the link. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.